All right, welcome to this third iteration of our youth preparation series. This is hosted by NGO-CSW New York's cohort of Global Youth Fellows for Gender Equality. The Youth Preparation Series aims to provide a platform for young voices to share experiences and discuss advocacy strategies in the lead up to NGO-CSW's 68th Forum in March 2024. So I will pass it off to today's fellows, Senamile, Mardhia, and Moufeeda. Senamile, take it away.
Hi. So good morning, afternoon, and evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Senamile, and I am from the Women's Legal Center, an African feminist legal organization that advances and protects women's rights in South Africa. And I'm ecstatic today to present today's session in collaboration with NGO-CSW, which is titled Amplifying Voices Through Advocacy, the Importance of Grassroots Activism. And I'm now pleased to hand over to my fellow Global Youth Fellows, Moufeeda and Mardhia.
Thank you, Senamile. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Moufeeda Haidar. I work as a Senior Youth Collective Coordinator with Restless Development. I am based in Beirut, Lebanon, and my work focused on SRHR within the MENA region. Mardhia?
Hello, everyone. My name is Mardhia, and I'm from Kurdistan region of Iraq. And basically, I'm from IMOK independent organization of media in Kurdistan region. But beside of that, I'm the founder and leader of the Green Dream Initiative for environmental advocacy and women empowerment.
Thank you, Mardhia. So for us, it's going to be more like as an interactive discussion, and I think Annabelle shared the agenda in the chat as well. So we will be having a discussion among ourselves, and then we're going to open the floor for Q&A. So please feel free later on to interact with us, and let's have a conversation. So first to start with Mardhia, maybe you can tell us more how do grassroots initiatives effectively engage and amplify marginalized voices, particularly in regions facing conflict and crisis, and especially where you are from Kurdistan. You're muted.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So yeah, actually, I'm so honored to be part of this insightful discussion on grassroots activism. So as a passionate advocate for gender equality, peace, climate change, actually my journey has led me to serve as many positions throughout the nonprofit organizations. And so this led me to lead the Green Dream Initiative. So right now my focus is on youth mainly, as my slogan is believe in the power of youth, believe in the power of young minds. So I believe in actively engaging the youth, especially in my region, Kurdistan, which youth are entirely I can say abandoned from almost everything. They are blamed for everything. They are not given any opportunities. So fortunately, throughout my experience and leading this initiative of Green Dream, I've implemented various projects. This plastic-free Kirkuk, Science for AIDS initiative, and role of women in gender equality and climate change. So the leadership in grassroots initiative is about fostering collaboration, listening to the community's needs, and creating sustainable solutions. So I can say that the Green Dream Initiative has taught me the transformative power of grassroots action in creating positive environmental and women change, women empowerment, those changes, especially as practical and personal experience, I believe that when the initiatives all come together and they want to work for a purpose, the voice will amplify more. And here we can see how those initiatives, like the leaders, talk about the critical problems, and then they all know, like any skill in any company or organization, who is good at what. So which initiative works on what, so they're good at that one. So here, about the voices, so I think maybe Moufeeda can amplify the conflict more.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mardhia. I'll definitely highlight the conflict, and I resonate with you in terms of how youth are left out in many spaces, and in especially in our countries. And despite they are the main power and the main engine behind every change, they are the first to respond. And how collectively, when we work together, things actually resonate and make a change. But speaking about conflict, yeah, I think that in regions facing conflict and crisis, amplifying marginalized voices becomes a collective responsibility. So engagement on different levels, in any means, in any way possible, it is a collective responsibility. On media, writing the story, speaking up, they are all means of activism in order to make the voices of the marginalized heard. In such context, everyone is affected tremendously, and the human rights are violated on all. But women are in the ongoing attacks on Gaza. Women are taking contraceptive pills. If you want to focus on SRHR and on the work that we are doing, women are taking contraceptive pills to postpone their periods. They are ongoing. They're doing C-section surgeries without anesthetics. They're using cloths as sanitary pads, living in tents without any access to privacy or hygiene or clean water, lanterns, etc. And all of this, sometimes we see them documented without being said like as is, what is the SRHR effect, but we can think beyond and analyze the current case, because this doesn't affect their lives only now, it affects their lives in the future. And also in Sudan and Congo, women are being raped and sexually assaulted systematically. So these stories and these facts and everything that's happening is being documented. Despite that, in many instances, for example, in whether journalists or bloggers or activists from the ground who are documenting their lives are being held at risk, and their families are being at risk as well, because they are being systematically attacked. So we can see all of this, that we couldn't get the chance to know all of this if these activists on ground weren't actually doing the work. So we know in conflicts or in wars, things will happen. But the difference is that when these are being further documented by these activists who are risking their lives, what's happening actually becomes the truth that cannot be negotiated or discussed. And I would also like to give an example about Lebanon as well. So in Lebanon, without the power and engagement of the civil society and young people, Beirut couldn't stand on its feet after the Beirut explosion. Young people were the first to respond to it, and the first to actually lobby and maybe seek funds to rebuild the city, to support the marginalized, especially, for example, lots of people from the marginalized communities, such as migrant workers and LGBTQ community, live close by to the explosion. And many of them do not have either the means or the family support to rebuild their lives. So due to the local initiatives and the activists, they were able to support and rebuild the city and respond to this crisis in different dimensions. And also the economic crisis in Lebanon that affected everyone on different levels, but it also had its own effect on women when it came to period poverty. A lot of initiatives were actually dealt with this crisis and emerged due to this need, which came from the grassroots, from young activists who who actually also lobbied with the government back then to subsidize these, for example, sanitary pads, because the government was subsidizing, for example, cashew nuts or let's say, or maybe luxury items instead of subsidizing sanitary pads. So the young people and the activists were the first to respond to this, to lobby to the government, to seek for funds, to secure some hygiene kits and sanitary pads in response to this crisis, especially also with Syrian refugees who were also living in dire situations. But also talking about how things are documented, and talk further how when things are documented are widely shared. I think the expert in our social media guru and in technology is Senamile. So maybe you can tell us more about this and how social media plays a pivotal role in documentation and activism.
Okay. Thank you, Moufeeda. I'd also like to just also engage on this idea of how grassroots initiatives effectively engage and amplify marginalized voices. And the first thing I'd like to note is that maybe the first thing to think is to target this question is by noting that one, everyone has some capacity to make a change. And I think that's what I like about social media and TV in this concept, is that the truth is then the issue really becomes how do you make this change? And with this rapidly deteriorating humanitarian crisis, grassroots initiatives and activists are needed more now than ever. Here at WLC, in our desperate pursuit to advance women's rights, we collaborate a lot with other organizations and activists within specifically our Human Rights Defenders Program, which ensures that we keep connected to the lived realities of women in society. And it is these organizations, these grassroots organizations, that refer women to us via the legal advice unit. And a lot of the cases we have litigated successfully at the Constitutional Court would not have been possible without the coalitions we have on the ground. So by actively working with a wide range of collaborators and networks, we amplify our collective impact. Another thing is that grassroots organizations do not have to be fancy, and that's what we discovered now in the 21st century, where it's not difficult to try and work towards amplifying marginalized voices. We have personally witnessed firsthand how effective social media platforms are as a tool for raising awareness and creating sustained movements. We watched South Africa in real time a month ago in the International Court of Justice use videos and clips taken by everyday people to illustrate the plight of Palestinians in Gaza. We are in a very important age where we can use TV and media and cell phones to shift an entire global conversation. So right now we exist in a world that has had more than a few once in a lifetime world events, and COVID also greatly impacted how activism operates. So almost overnight, people were placed on lockdown and the world was shrouded in deep uncertainty. However, the truth is, in times of crisis, women and girls consistently suffer disproportionately. One of the first things that actually happened during COVID was a deprioritization of reproductive health access for women, even though it was technically considered an essential component of health services. There was an increase in all of these times of crisis, the plight of women and girls is made worse by these deep and long-standing inequalities. There's almost always an increase in intimate partner violence, sexual exploitation, abuse, and harassment. And these are the dim realities for a lot of the women who currently live in times of crisis. So, and this happens despite the critical role women play within communities. And they are the first responders, and yet they're kept away from leadership roles and in peace-building processes, and continue to be excluded from rooms where decisions are made for them. But to butcher a very famous quote, I would like to think that patriarchal tools do not dismantle the misogynistic and patriarchal society So to butcher a very famous quote, patriarchal tools will not dismantle the misogynistic and patriarchal systems society is built on. So it is very important that in these grassroots activism and these activist roles, that they assist in ensuring that they are pulled in early in conversation, so that there is an early and sustained engagement with women and women-led groups that must be a priority whenever crisis strikes and not an afterthought. So now I'd actually really like to ask Moufeeda, like in the respective areas of your work, what strategies have you found to be most effective in navigating challenges and barriers?
Thank you, Senamile. Yeah, talking about strategy, we can talk when it comes to strategy. And to navigate our advocating for change, we do face a lot of barriers and backlash, and that also increases because fighting for the right thing is always hard. It's the hard way out. But what I would like actually to highlight or say, or what I think, is that we also ourselves have a huge responsibility ourselves to also ensure not to cause harm when we are advocating, or cause the individuals that we are advocating on their behalf any cause of harm. So as researchers, as active, we have a collective responsibilities on how we strategize in a very effective, smart way. I just would like to provide also a personal example that I encountered when I was doing my thesis. So I've done my thesis and master's on early child engagement in Lebanon, which is the promise to marry. Usually there has been huge discussions and huge campaigns around early child marriage. The percentage is around 6%, but it's not accurate, though it's not very recent. But given that in Lebanon we do not have a law that provides sets the minimum age of marriage, so it can go as low as 9, because we have 18 different sects with 15 different person status laws. So basically, depending on the sect that the girl is, the girl or the parents of the girl follow, then they will get to marry her based on this sect. So therefore, we do not have a unified law that sets the minimum age of marriage. So I thought at the beginning, why not tackle the roots, tackle the promise of engagement, promise of marriage, because many young girls are forced to get engaged at an early age, and then at the end they end up being married that they are falling between early marriage. However, when I started my research in a rural area in Lebanon, a bit conservative, and when I did my interviews with the girls, I find out that at some point this was the only way for them to actually know the guy that they were going to marry at the end. So I'm not saying it's right to keep the engagement or to keep the marriage at this young age. But when I found that this was their only way, otherwise they will get married without knowing the person that they are going in a relationship with, I thought that instead of actually, pushing this and pushing for this idea further, we must take a breath, step back, and think collectively, think with other organizations, with other researchers, with these young girls, what is the alternative? So we need to think about alternatives and offer alternatives before we push for something like abolishing it and changing it from the roots culturally, without trying to think, let's find an alternative and then push for it, because we might be causing harm at some point without even knowing, and can take the spot. But yes, to also talk further about from the State of Youth Civil Society report, which is published by Restless Development, it is a global youth-led publication which explores the youth civil society, their realities, social movement across the world are experiencing. So this year, this report focused on feminist movements and their critical role in making the world more equitable, safe, accessible for everyone. And one of these countries, it was held in 7 countries, and one of them was Lebanon, with a focus on Lebanon. there are some findings that are interesting that came up from these young feminist movements, that there's an important to redefine what impact means, and to build genuine allyship and partnership, and also to push back against social media giants. So just to dig further quickly on this, it's there's a need that the feminist movement, it's movement, it's always moving, it's thinking, working, defining success differently. So it's very important to actually build this partnership, this alignment across different regions, across different movements, to learn from each other, to build on each other's work, and no one can. And I think I can reflect on this experience, like here, like the three of us, like so much from both of you, and we come from different cultures, so it was really a very good way to, yeah. So, but what about you, Senamile? Like, what do you think about the strategies yourself from your context? You're muted.
Sorry about that, my computer refused to unmute. So in terms of strategies we found most effective, I think here at the center, I believe our biggest strategy has always been sort of to approach issues in a multi-pronged approach. Our first priority is to ensure that we approach all socio and economic issues with an intersectional lens. Our main objective has always been ensuring that when we do the work that we do, it can affect a broader class of women. And we try to ensure that when we challenge laws, it is not an academic exercise. However, in South Africa specifically, a massive challenge to the work we do here at the Women's Legal Center is that South Africa has got really good laws, but poor implementation. So this requires quite a flexible approach on our end, as the people we seek to assist encompass diverse backgrounds, social identities, and experiences that intersect with their gender, which generally makes their realities super unique. So, for example, in one of the constitutional court cases that we won recently was Bwanya, that recognized the rights of women in permanent life partnerships that they could inherit interstate. This case was actually born because numerous women had found themselves in partnership with no right to inherit and no legal recourse. However, as soon as we won that case, another case was born where we realized women in life partnerships were just simply not protected in the law at the termination of their partnerships, like a traditionally married woman would be in the instance of a divorce. Another example, especially in our SRHR focus area, is that we actually began a 2-year project working on a publication exploring recent developments and constraints and opportunities related to the advancement of sexual and reproductive health and rights in South Africa. But this had a specific focus on abortion access. And what we realized there was that one of the key barriers is the lack of access to information. And as we all know, that it is not enough for the law to declare abortion as legal, but it's important that the women and girls must be empowered with this knowledge. And this is once again where we employ this multi-pronged approach by facilitating workshops, disseminating information through pamphlets, dialogues, and websites. Another role we play usually includes playing the role of a watchdog, because that's imperative in our efforts to realize rights. So we know that access to justice is only realized if the most vulnerable groups of society have access. And we've intervened specifically in the SRHR focus area in public health institutions where they've denied women their access to termination of pregnancy services. We've ensured that healthcare facilities operate the way they're supposed to through extensive monitoring and evaluating processes. This is all to try and combat the challenges of inaccessibility and to ensure that the women in their diversity are able to access sexual and reproductive health services in a manner that is non-coercive and free from all forms of discrimination. So I'd like to hear more from you, Mardhia, on the work you do in Green Dream.
Thank you. Actually, I would like to start from SRHR, like regarding the knowledge, advocacy, and awareness on that. First of all, I want to share that, like in the secondary and high school, in the science books, there is like chapters about SRHR, but unfortunately, for the last 20 years, I can say, or even more than 20 years, the teachers are skipping this part in the science book. So it's not studied, it's just in the book, and the other things like skip it, and the students just like to just skip this chapter. So this is like the reason for this is like it's not I don't say that it's not allowed to talk about this topic, but it's like it's not a common thing. So people feel shy. They are not ready for this yet. So, for example, personally, in my initiative workshop and advocacy for Science for AIDS initiative and like SRHR, the youth participants which came, like they were all university students, they were feeling very, very shy. Like they could not say any word in the first day of the workshop. Till like I decided to like with the trainer like to do some like activities and more stuff. So and like or I say to the trainer, please try to use some other metaphors, like try to engage them, so at least they are not feeling shy. Like so, this is the scientific thing, and I also want to mention that about the environmental advocacy and some also SRHR, there are unique challenges. So especially in the regions like where like I can say culture, tradition, and religion is all came up together, like Kurdistan and Iraq. So navigating the issues and the cultural norms, so it resources scarcity, and it requires a lot of adaptability, flexibility, and strategic thinking. So my experience have taught me that the importance of building a bridge between grassroots activism and the larger institutions to overcome those challenges effectively. Personally, I could not do any of the projects which I've done so far with my initiative without the help of the international organizations and some great institutions. There are some companies and stuff like to support you, but when it comes to the project that they see your project, they totally reject. So navigating challenges in this advocacy, environmental, women empowerment, SRHR, especially in regions facing conflict, crisis, so requires resilience and strategic approaches. So especially in the Kurdistan region in Iraq, which I live, there's been political issues with the borders inside our country, like, and also beside of that, I can say the political issues and economical. We are in Kurdistan. We are in a economical crisis since 2014. So unfortunately, we are in February, and in my city, school is not open yet. The schools, all of the children are not going to school because of the economic crisis. So teachers are in a protest. Yeah, and children are just not going to school. So what will happen to the next generation when the next year they want to go? So there are a lot of actually stuff. So, however, forming alliances with local communities, I believe, leveraging technology for awareness and adapting our strategies to the socio-political landscape, we can make a meaningful process. So it's a constant learning process, and collaboration is the key to overcome these challenges. Thank you. And now I would like to ask Moufeeda, how collaborative efforts between grassroots organizations and larger institutions such as government bodies or international NGOs can be strengthened to maximize impact on issues related to environmental advocacy, sexual reproductive health rights, and women's rights.
Yeah, thank you, Mardhia. Yeah, I actually would like to build on what you mentioned in terms of the working with INGO or the governments. I think it's very important to, whenever providing funds or whether international organizations working with local organizations and grassroots organizations to attend to their needs, because at the end, the most important thing for change or activism, it's to be a bottom-up approach rather than the top-down. And this should be also reflected within the funding, within the programming, within everything else. And so to expand further, the resources should be unrestricted. And when I mean unrestricted in a way, they shouldn't have like, you know, for example, a call to submit a proposal, but rather to provide an open fund and for the local grassroots organizations to decide what topic is the priority to work on. So this this funding, it affects, first of all, the access to, it allows young movements led by young activists and grassroots organizations to apply based on their needs. They define their needs and they implement in their communities based of what is the best approach and what needed community decide in which stage they fund. Also, it's very important to adapt. So, for example, in the language, like not to require a lot of very complicated language or proposal writing or documents that are too much complicated, that require very well-established organizations that have a huge history in order to be able to apply for these grants. And the language is also very important to know what to write and what terms to use. And also, it's very important, I think, to have this collaboration between like capacity building. So identify what are the needs that these local organizations or grassroots organizations need, and based on it, provide the capacities needed. So with time, there is an actual sustainable development rather than it's one time only. And this experience, it might, you know, like very unrealistic, but it is, and we are actually implementing it. And there are different projects that are being implemented in the region and in Lebanon under such approach. There might be some, of course, technicalities, but this approach is turning out to be very successful, as it encouraged young feminists, even if like two young feminists who came up with a organization to apply for a simple fund and actually move, because this allows them to build a history. And I'd also like to reflect on the State of Youth Civil Society report that I shared in the chat earlier, and talked about the findings that it was implemented in the 7 different countries. A lot of input that was there, such as like amplify the voices of young feminists. So for the INGOs or for the I can't say government bodies because there's a weird relationship with the government, so I'm gonna leave that alone and just try to leverage on the civil society and the international community. And also, given that they have a lot to say, the feminist movements, but maybe they don't always have the right platforms, so it's important to amplify their voices, to provide them with the right platforms to leverage on and to talk further. And also to rethink the funding and the funding processes, and to take into consideration as well that the feminist movements are incredibly diverse. So try to shift this funding mechanism from the traditional organizational model structures in a way that better support this dynamic young feminist movement that is there. Senamile, what do you think?
Communication. Right.
That's really interesting. Thank you, Moufeeda. So with us, I think the WLC, we always try to act as a bridge between grassroots active organizations and the government. So we've always tried to maintain and forge meaningful collaborations and partnerships, and we've seen them lead to significant advancements in our collective pursuit of justice. So one of our most incredible examples
they had to do things
was the WLC working alongside trade unions and other civil society actors, where we work towards ensuring that domestic workers who work in private homes can now claim compensation for occupational injuries and illnesses, which was also a direct consequence / outcome of our strategic intervention in a constitutional court case. So I think it's very important that when we look at collaborating in the sector, that the best way to strengthen these collaborative efforts would be to ensure that there's funding made available for feminist organizations and women-led organizations, because history and we've seen that they are the most undervalued and poorly funded in these human rights spaces. The government also needs to understand perhaps the challenges that civil society faces and vice versa. And it's also important for governments to create and maintain gender responsive systems that are geared towards protecting women and realizing their rights. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for talking about the government, as I've missed part of it.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thank you for both of you.
Mardhia?
So,
Over
yeah, maybe, yeah, over to you.
You can like say what you want, Moufeeda. No worries.
No, not at all. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you. Actually, for specifically for addressing the SRHR, I believe grassroots activism plays a pivotal role, especially in the conflict zones such as Kurdistan and Iraq, between like different borders, and like we are really in a conflict zone. So, for example, my initiative, it's part of the Masarona project. So through our initiative, we've advocated for accessible healthcare, gender equality, and destigmatizing reproductive health. So I believe that the grassroots activism became a lifeline for communities, providing crucial support and raising awareness about SRHR challenges. Amidst conflict, it's about resilience and empowerment in the face of adversity. As I mentioned, like for over 20 years, like none of the teachers, neither the government parties nor the Ministry of Education, they didn't like care, neither shared like the topic of SRHR could be like there's something which we should talk about it. I can say that many women, especially in the rural places and even urban places, like when they face it, depression after like they give birth to their child, they face depression. And like there's something unfortunately which is very common in my country and in my city. When someone is like mentally, we call it like they have depression, when they are mentally not well, the people around them, especially elder people, they took this person to a religious person, and they start to hit this woman. They start to do some kind of abusing this woman in order to say like there's a spirit, a bad spirit, something inside this woman. So this led us to the this led us to like even they are worsening the woman's case, not in a bad way. Unfortunately, there are many cases like that, because people are not aware that this person has depression, for example, has this. So we should take them to a doctor. It's only about taking a pill. It's not about a bad spirit or blah blah blah, or those old and old stories and stuff. So unfortunately, yeah, this thing is really common here. So yeah, I'm really sorry for this, because if we are enough to talk about something like which is scientific and should be talking about that, people are not going to let to this way, and there are many ways who are victim of this situation. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mardhia. Maybe we can wrap up with like one sentence of like after sharing our expertise and ideas, maybe we can wrap up with like what activism means to you in one sentence. So who would like to go?
Okay, I will go. Activism means like working to make your community and society better. For me, it's like this is what I'm dreaming about and I'm doing right now personally. So this is activism for me. Thank you.
Okay. I think activism to me would mean having a deep unwillingness to leave the world as it is and finding the little corner of it and trying to work towards fixing it, even if it does take a few lifetimes to fix. I think that's what it means to me.
Activism is
Yeah, thank you. Both very inspiring. For me, I think working like lobbying for change with whatever means available, whether silent or loud. It doesn't have to be loud all the time. Sometimes you can work in your silence behind the scene, but as long as you're working for a better world, then that's definitely activism. Thank you all for joining. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us today. Annabelle, I hand it over to you, or if there are any questions or anything you would like to discuss.
Yeah, if anyone in our crowd wants to put questions for our panelists here in the chat, feel free. Or you can raise your hand and ask a question too.
Yeah, please go ahead, Ivy.
Go ahead, Ivy.
Hello, ladies. I would like to ask you how we can approach girls to teach them to get more activist, like going to schools and preparing the next generation. And especially there is a lot of people around the world here, and I would like to understand that how it gets done in other places. I'm in São Paulo, Brazil. And I wrote a bill to teach politics in schools. And I think that is very important if we teach kids to be an activist. And I know that you are so young, but I would like to hear from you how you get more younger than that. Thank you.
Anyone would like to start? Okay, I think it's a hard yet like
I would like to start. Okay.
but is actually a hard one. I think if we're not talking about schools, I think the family affects a lot, like the small entourage, see examples around them, because sometimes it feels like teaching young girls by doing might be even more effective than actually talking about it. So seeing these life examples around them and telling them about activists in their country and sharing these stories as an inspiration might help a lot. Because just as something related to schools, I remember we had a subject in school that has to do civil education. So we had like a subject called civil education, but it had never had the aspect of activism in it, even though it's very important to integrate it.
I think I'll also be quite short. I think it's important to engage the youth where they are. We don't give them as much credit as we should. I think they have interesting tools and really incredible insights as to what they want to see the world in. I believe that activism found me very early, and that's just because sometimes you see the world and usually you don't usually have the vocabulary or the necessary words or the impressive lingo or understanding of the issues you see in the outside world, but you recognize that there are issues, and it's just always being willing to engage with the youth, to speak to them, and to really have them form part of the solution is what would really engage younger girls and women to join, and younger children to join activism. I think that's the easiest way. I think that's how I found my footing, where I've always said I'm always surrounded by incredible women who are always willing to teach me things, and I'm always willing to learn. And I think that's just how it goes. You pass it from one generation to the next. Yeah, that's my answer.
Thank you. As Moufeeda said, I think the environment and the family which you are part of is very important. But beside of that, education is really crucial. As personally, I see from my relatives who are, for example, they didn't finish school, they give up on education. Like they probably almost all of them get married under 18, and some of them I can say that discriminated, divorced, and then some now have children. So education is really important. And beside of that, the world of technology is can give a lot of things to you depending on the way how you're using it. Yeah, thank you.
Looks like we have another question from Elena. How can we help other youth with the literacy of activism? I know a lot of people who are scared to get involved because they feel inadequate or undereducated to speak on an issue or act on it.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna steal what you said, Senamile, earlier. You said something very important in this regard, that anyone and any one of us even can be an activist. It's not like, you should have this kind of, because usually whenever you say an activist, it feels like, you have this kind of titles or knowledge or something to be an activist. And that's why at the end, I also mentioned that you can be a silent activist, because there are different ways of activism. Like for me, for example, we were talking about this earlier, on social media. For me, I'm like zero active on social media. Like I on media. So I encourage others to speak up, because at some point people might, tag. It's like, you are an activist, you're not, you're a feminist, you're not. I mean, who are you to tag someone else? So I think we need to encourage other young people, like, you are who you are, and if you believe in a cause, in whatever ways you can do it, just do it. Like, even if you can work with others on the ground, just do it. In whatever way you can make it means that you have, you can do it. Just building confidence, and always remember that no one is better to tag the other. It's not a title. If activism means tagging someone, like, if you're not in this category, you're not an activist. I don't think any of us wants to be tagged with this anymore.
I think that's brilliant, Moufeeda. And as Moufeeda said, we've had quite a few conversations since we started this fellowship. And I think what the point of this series today was to specifically make activism accessible to everyone. We've spoken about how, like, the smallest acts were impacted and were on a global stage, with people taking videos that they never thought would do much, but just highlighting an issue. There was really no literacy needed, no vocabulary needed, but it was just you speaking up on things. We've seen it change the tide in America, in South Africa, in Gaza. Everywhere we go, there's a million ways to be an activist. And it's important that the importance of the series for us was to make sure that you understand how accessible it is to the youth and to people to really understand that small actions, as a friend of mine always says, there's a big butterfly effect to very small actions will always result in greater, bigger change. So I think, yeah, that's also very important when considering literacy and vocabulary. There's really no need for that. Like, speak up in however way you feel is effective.
I also agree with both Senamile and Moufeeda. I think like wherever and whenever you are, you can just be an activist. It's like it's not just something like as they say. They say that if you ever want to do anything, don't wait to have everything and to make it perfect. Just do it. So there are a lot of ways, and like so just speak and yeah, it's like that. Thank you.
We have another great question from Quincy, I think. What tips do you have for stopping or combating prejudice against youth from entering conversations with youth activists?
Should I go? Yeah, just give like, if I understood the question right, I think like listening and active listening and not underestimating their knowledge at the same time. So providing the space because at the end it's I think it's a crossway learning. It's not like young people don't want to learn from the experiences of the previous generation, because at the end none of us will be here without the paved way of our foremothers and all the work that have been done. So it cannot be just thrown away. So there must be this kind of mutual conversation, if I may say, and learning. So it's very important to actually actively listen to what they want or what they want to say as young people, and also not to underestimate their knowledge, because at many instances I feel, you know, it becomes a bit tokenistic, like here we give you the space, but do 1, 2, 3, like as if there's no enough trust or belief in what they actually know or want to do. I'm just following the order, you know.
Yeah, at this point. I almost made a very unhinged comment, but I think like Moufeeda says, I think respect is very important. There's a difference between respect and respectability politics when it comes to activism. I think the older generation has pearls of wisdom and great things to teach the younger people, but we must also recognize, I think I mentioned it, I don't know if I was so nervous I sped past that point of how COVID has really changed how we protest and we are activists. I remember in my university times, you were an activist, you went out to protest, and a lot of older generations now, they criticize the younger generations for not really going out onto the streets and like being multiple in numbers. But we find that the younger generation, you actually see them mostly on social media. They can disseminate information. They are quicker and more equipped in terms of ensuring that a lot of people know a lot of information, and they are also quick to organize and to structure. And these are skills that you see in physical protests, but are now switched to a virtual space. So I think it's an important thing to recognize that, as Moufeeda said, we can learn from one another, we can engage with one another, but it's also very important that we must not let the politics of our egos overshadow the importance of the work that we do. I think it's very important to remember why you're there, and even if, like, it's always important to, one, advocate for yourself, to speak up for yourself. But at the end of the day, we must always come back to the social issues and social change we wish to see happen. So I think that's very important, to have priorities, but to also recognize how much we can learn from one another in terms of, like, can you imagine how powerful we would all be if there was this multi-generational approach to the society issues we currently have? Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there's always like the two ways of learning from the experiences and from the history, because if we always like start to do everything from scratch, like there would be no inventions, because you're always like everyone will start from scratch. So, but meanwhile, like there's a spirit and willingness of adventure and trying new things in everyone. Sometimes, despite knowing what would be the result, you just want to start. Like sometimes we think like our way and the result would be different, even if it's not. And believing in what truly you're doing gives you the courage to resist and stand against all of the speeches and words like no and like of other people against you.
We got another question from Veronica. What kind of actions can NGOs or institutions avoid in order to not tokenize youth in advocacy?
I think there are different levels. Like as I mentioned earlier in the funds, it reflects a lot. Like kind of to provide them the unrestricted fund, not to like if we, okay, first of all, to start with advocacy, this means like in any kind of talking engagements or spaces. I think providing them with the space rather than actually, just having there someone that checklist, we have a young person, but what is the young person offering? Does that reflect their actual experience? Does that add to their life? Will it maybe build on their career? Will it affect their future? Or is it something that we are, like all the NGOs, only benefiting from? Because otherwise it will be only a one-way, benefiting from their time, never paying for them when they have a speaking engagement, for example, is a really a way of just, using them instead of appreciating what they want to say. So just to summarize it, because I shifted from the idea of funding to advocacy, I think the main things is to make sure that what they are doing or what you're inviting them for actually fits their work and their expertise. And this actually also builds on their career. I think this from my end.
Excuse me. I think it's also why I love the organization and I was attracted to the organization I work for, is that when we must always avoid not to have this extractive approach when we are looking for assistance and we're looking for numbers and we're looking for people to assist. So the youth is not there to run around with the pamphlets, or not there to just be there to make up numbers or be seen as, oh, we have youth engagement in the activist and movement spaces that we're a part of. I think it's very important, like I've been saying this whole night, look at the people's lived experience. I think Moufeeda touched on perfectly on how does this assist them, how does this impact their society and their lived experience, and how can they contribute properly and accurately into the space that they're in. I think that's important. I think what would make them like tokens and what would make it an extractive approach is when you dismiss everything that they say and you think we're all back in school where we're telling them as principals and teachers, this is what you're doing, and they don't really get any meaningful engagement from it, because then that is also what sort of discourages the youth to be a part of activist spaces and activist movements, because they essentially have no say and find themselves just as disempowered as they were before they joined the space.
Yeah, I believe like for example, if I talk about related to my culture, there is a misunderstanding and honestly I can say a bad vision against the non-profit organization, especially for those who are working for women. And like there is also like a vision and like some kind of stuff it's for those women who are working in the non-profit organizations. For example, someone told my grandma that your granddaughter like engaged with civil society organizations and this and that will happen to her and she will never get married. So there are a lot of those misconceptions, but it's the we need to show and open the way to the youths in order like to have courage and decide what they want and why they are doing what they are doing. Yeah, thank you.
Moeniba answered or brought up a question that you guys kind of touched on, but you can maybe get a little more into depth with your own experiences. There's a huge fear factor for some young people to speak up, particularly in their respective communities. Did any of you encounter this? And if you did, how did you overcome this?
I did. I feel like at some point I really had the fear of, you know, they might know more, and maybe everything that I've mentioned earlier, it's kind of coming from a personal experience. Definitely no one felt it, but I had it like in me. Maybe they know more, just maybe because they use the right terms, for example, or or some sophisticated terms, or they were they would, you know, shout on the streets. I would be participating in a lot of protests, but maybe I didn't have it in me to be the one who's actually holding the microphone and do it. Despite when I was a kid, I used to do it, but you know, time changes. And I think how I felt like I went back kind of to my old me when I was like, no, you know what's right, and no one is there to tell you how to do it. And I think also it comes from maybe encouragement of people, by the way. It doesn't have to be this small circle, but at many instances, sometimes we get small comments that are encouraging, and it just, you know, builds into your head to move forward. So I think that's why solidarity and supporting each other is really important. Yeah, that's it from my personal experience.
I think I did too. I definitely did too. I think, but what it ended up doing was making me speak up even more. I think, but it's not naive, but I guess it's dismissive to think that there's never going to come a time where you're nervous to speak up and nervous to talk about the issues that are in society. I know that I went to a university that had a lot of systematic issues, a lot of racial systematic issues that come from obviously South Africa's colonial and apartheid past. And it always looks like a big monster, this proverbial multi-headed snake where you chop one off, another one grows in its place. But it's just to speak up, I guess. It's to learn from when you don't speak up. It's to always just constantly try what you can do. Activism is not perfect. No one is. You can just only keep trying and seeing what you could accomplish, I guess.
Thank you. Yeah, I totally agree with my two pillows, Moufeeda and Senamile. Like activism is not just something like perfect, which like it's not like a path which you're going to go through this path. It's just like just how you want to be and how you're going to do it in your own perspective and learning process and all of the metaphors and like ways to learn and to serve the society and the country.
Great. I guess I'll open it up one last time if someone wants to raise their hand and maybe ask one more question to our amazing panelists here. Going once, going twice. All right, would you guys like to close us out today?
Yeah, I would like really to thank you all for coming, and definitely for Senamile and Mardhia. It was a great. Oh, we have two raised hands before.
I think I saw Nikruka. If you'd like to unmute, I guess we can finish up with two more questions. We have time.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Nkiruka from Nigeria. So I want to ask a question regarding activism. I know that a lot of young people here in Nigeria have their different initiatives where they do different things regarding the issues we go through here in Nigeria. And being someone who has worked in the nonprofit sector and someone who is working in the nonprofit sector where people that have gone through rape and sexual abuse have been taken care of. So I want to know how can, as an individual, that is not associated with any organization have a say? How can their voices be heard? You know, as an individual who doesn't have an organization of its own, and it's not under any organization where these issues are discussed, can stand on their own, have their voices heard, and then be seen as someone who is doing this, who is really advocating for women and girls in their community. Because I know that when you are not associated with any organization, or you don't have your own initiative, it seems like you are just someone who is just making noise somewhere. So how can someone who doesn't have their own initiative or working under any organization that advocates for women can stand and speak out, and their voice can still be acknowledged or be heard? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it's otherwise, like if you have your own initiative, it will be easy. But at many instances, if you are advocating or maybe being an activist under a certain NGO, it kind of creates some constraints or a structure that you cannot go beyond. So at many times you will have to speak on your behalf rather than on the behalf of the organization that you work for, because maybe you can't represent them in everything that you say. So I think as an individual, you have the freedom to do whatever you want and speak up freely as much as you want. And I guess in this case, it also depends on who do you want the voice, like to whom you want it to be heard, and in what ways, like is it their stories? And there comes a huge responsibility with that, because it affects their lives as well. So I think taking into consideration their, like, you know, confidentiality and other aspects, and like do no harm, and also knowing who you want to advocate for, or is it like, you know, documenting stories, it can be creating an online platform or social media platform, etc. So I think there are different ways that can be done, but taking these into consideration.
Thank you for Moufeeda for that, because I think you touched on a very important part of that type of activism, like the responsibility of activists. Here at the WLC, we have in our Right to Be Free from Violence focus area, we have a term that sort of operates across all focus area, is this sort of victim/survivor-centered approach when you do work that has a lot of trauma embedded in it. And it's very important that when you're engaging with women and you've decided that you're going to be an activist and you're going to speak up for them, you don't do it in a way that creates some sort of secondary victimization and trauma for the women you seek to assist. So it's very important that in your activism, it is actually informed by the women you wish to assist. And I think the main thing, if you feel like you don't have a network, is to create one. Is if you're an activist, you're an activist. So I think there's a lot of power in collaboration. I think we touched on it just earlier in the evening, that find like-minded people. And I think Moufeeda touched a lot on being strategic about it and how you approach the solution, because I think you have potential to, if you collaborate with the right type of people, you have the potential to create a greater impact and to create greater change in your own societies, or even your own communities, or even your own neighborhood. Like, it's just to collaborate with the right. There's a lot of power in collaboration.
Okay, thank you. As my fellow said, like, I think the way of being an activism is like needs a person which can hold a lot of and a great huge responsibility. So because it's the power, it's the sense of this feeling of responsibility which makes you to speak up and shout for the right of the others, to ask the right of others, to advocate for them, to take care of the others, and like to take care of the life of some people who the society, like there's a saying which goes like keep like keep it like when there is a wind, keep touching your hat so it doesn't blow with the wind. So it means like only take the responsibility of yourself and take care of yourself. So when I think the activism starts when you get out of your comfort zone, and when you feel that you're responsible for not only yourself but for many others, and you have to speak out and care of the others also.
Thanks, guys. I think there was one more question. I've missed who was raising their hand, but last chance to speak up if you want to raise your hand again. Okay, I think we can wrap it up, you guys. Do you want to close us out after this very inspiring conversation today?
Oh, am I doing?
Thank you so much, Annabelle, and everyone. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. It was really great, and thank you for the questions, and it made it actually more interactive as we really hoped. So yeah.
On my end as well, thank you everyone for attending. Thank you for registering. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you guys, and to my co-presenters. It was a great pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
You all for giving your time to us, to listening for us. Thank you so much for SW and for the my great fellows. Thank you so much.
Thank you all, and thank you all for joining. Have a great rest of your day wherever you are. Great
Bye,
job, guys.
everyone. You can unmute yourself and say goodbye.
Thank
So
you.
we can hear
Ciao.
everyone's voices.
Bye.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.
Great job,
Bye.
guys. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks
Bye.
for being
Bye
here.
bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.